Welcome to my thoughts on the monster movie classic, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. I've talked on this channel a few times before about my history with these classic monster movies. And because I've gone on about this at length, I'll try and give the really short version here. I'll try and be brief. So I developed a fascination with the Universal classic monster movies around third or fourth grade, which is about the time I think most boys really get interested in this kind of stuff. I was not allowed to watch it at that age. I had very restrictive parents. My mom wouldn't let me watch hardly anything. I couldn't even watch Tom and Jerry as a kid because Tom and Jerry was considered too violent. I couldn't watch the superhero cartoons. I couldn't watch much of anything as a kid. So I read about these monster movies. My school library had a couple of books about, classic movie monsters, and I read through them cover to cover, and I memorized all these trivia about the Universal monster movies or classic horror movies that I was not allowed to watch until middle school, around 7th grade, 6th or 7th grade. After years of pleading or arguing with my mom, she decided that I was old enough to watch these, and I would see them rerun on cable. In the 1990s, which is when I was in middle school, the AMC channel, American Movie Classics, would rerun those classic monster movies occasionally throughout the year. And especially during the month of October, and especially on Halloween. On Halloween, they would do a marathon. And so I would make it a Halloween tradition to watch as many of these monster movies as I could during the years when I was in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. And because of that, I have a lot of nostalgia for these movies and still view it as a Halloween tradition when I can. For several years, I was living abroad in which it was difficult for me to access these movies. I don't really pirate. I'm not technical. I don't know how to navigate that and all that kind of stuff. So I would look for copies of these movies uploaded onto YouTube. 4 years ago, in 2021, there was a copy of House of Dracula, one of the classic monster movies that was uploaded onto YouTube. House of Dracula is unfortunately one of the weakest of the classic monster movies. It was right at the end of the run when the studio had just kind of stopped caring, essentially. But it's still one of the classic monster movies. So I watched it. I reviewed it 4 years ago on this channel. I'll link to my review of that in the description down below. And I thought maybe that would be an annual Halloween tradition. But every year since then, I've gone to YouTube and I've searched YouTube trying to find full versions of these movies that were uploaded onto YouTube and could not find them any other subsequent years. I guess Universal must be strictly enforcing their copyright on YouTube, making sure that all the versions of the movies that get uploaded there get taken down. But this year, I'm back in the United States and have access to several streaming services. So I got into Google and Googled where can I stream these movies, and didn't actually find them on any streaming services that I have access to. But as a result of that Google search, I found that I think most or all of them are on internetarchive.org. Which, I wish I would have known about that when I was in Vietnam. It looked like they were uploaded several years ago. So I could have been watching these movies still in Vietnam if I had just known, instead of searching YouTube, go to Internet Archive. I'm not sure if they are there legally. I suspect not, but they're there at the moment. I didn't search through all of them, but it seems like a lot of them are there. So having access to a lot of them, all of them, maybe on Internet Archive, I decided that I would start off with my favorite, which is Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Now, Keep in mind that most of these I haven't seen since I was like 14. So I'm going off of very faded memories here. But as far as I remember, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman was one of the better ones. Kind of. I mean, yeah, obviously, I think if you're going by the critically acclaimed ones, you'd go with the original Dracula or the original Frankenstein, or probably The Bride of Frankenstein, which is the critical darling. That's what all the critics love. And, maybe in future years I'll revisit those. But the real fun of these Universal monster movies is, of course, the monster mashes. The ones where 2 or 3 monsters appear. And Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is the first of the monster mash movies. It's the first one where you get the sense that this is a shared cinematic universe. That, excuse me, that these monsters are existing in the same universe. This is the first crossover movie. And it's again, going off my memory from when I was 14, the most intriguing one of the 3 monster mashes. So House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula are both notable because they have all 3 monsters in them, whereas Frankenstein vs. the Wolfman only has 2 monsters in it, Frankenstein and the Wolfman, but not Dracula. Dracula would show up in the other 2 movies, but Frankenstein and the Wolfman, only Frankenstein and the Wolfman. So we are minus Dracula. But House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula have sections on them that drag. Whereas, again, if memory serves, House of Frankenstein I haven't seen since I was like 14. House of Dracula I just saw 4 years ago and can definitely attest that that one drags a little bit in sections. But House of Frankenstein, I think, is the one with a little bit of a tighter script. Kind of. The script has problems. They all have problems. But it's got several things going for it. And maybe I'll talk about the things that are good about it before I get into nitpicking it. So, like a lot of these movies, it does have plot problems. And like a lot of these movies, some of this is because it got rewritten or redone in production. And yeah, I guess maybe I'll talk about that now. So this movie comes in continuity right after Ghost of Frankenstein. Now, Ghost of Frankenstein, as it happens, is the only one of these movies I never saw. I never saw. For no particular reason, just it was never on TV when I was into these movies. So I've seen all the Dracula movies from the 1930s and 40s. The Wolfman only had 1 solo movie. I saw all the other Frankenstein movies, but I never saw Ghost of Frankenstein. But I'm familiar with it because I've read up about it on the internet and read the Wikipedia page, etc. So Ghost of Frankenstein ends with the hunchback Igor, who's played by Bela Lugosi, who's most famous for playing Dracula, getting his brain transplanted into the Frankenstein monster. His plan was he wanted to rule the world or become very powerful by getting his brain transported into Frankenstein's monster. But because of some mismatch with the biochemistry or whatever, he gets his brain transplanted into Frankenstein's monster, but he can't see. So he is now blind. He can talk, but he can't see. And then the movie ends there, and he gets trapped in the burning castle. And Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman picks up with Frankenstein's monster. When Frankenstein's monster is thawed out of the ice, he has the voice of Bela Lugosi, because Bela Lugosi is playing the character now. And Bela Lugosi is voicing the character because that's where we left off in the previous movie. So the previous movie established Igor's brain is now in Frankenstein, so he talks with Bela Lugosi's voice. And Bela Lugosi is a Hungarian actor who has sometimes a rather thick Hungarian accent. And that was very effective when Bela Lugosi played Dracula in the original Dracula, because Dracula is supposed to be an Eastern European character. And in fact, that's that version of Dracula that Bela Lugosi made famous is the version of Dracula that we kind of think of now. But when Frankenstein was talking with that Hungarian voice, apparently during the initial daily screenings of it, the crew thought it was so funny they would just break out laughing. And so the studio thought, okay, we can't have this. So they cut out all the scenes where Frankenstein was talking with Bela Lugosi's voice. And in doing so, caused the movie to make a bit less sense. So those scenes are probably lost to history now. They weren't saved. They've probably been destroyed. Apparently, people are still kind of looking for them, hopefully, but it's doubtful that they'll ever be recovered. But we do have copies of the original script. So some YouTube videos, and I'll link to them in the description down below, have been able to do dramatic recreations of what would have been missing from those scenes. And in that dialogue, we get the monster who is Frankenstein's monster with Igor's brain, filling us in on a lot of what's going on and why the monster is doing what he's doing. And all that stuff makes a lot more sense if you see those deleted scenes recreated, or if you read about those deleted scenes, you're like, ah, okay. So that's why the monster was doing that. When you just watch the movie, the actions of the monster don't seem to make a lot of sense. And Frankenstein's monster is, it's a little bit unclear what exactly he's doing on the screen and why he's lumbering around in the directions he's doing. So it doesn't make a lot of sense in the current version. It would have made more sense in the original version if they hadn't cut out all the scenes where Bela Lugosi was talking. But anyways, so that's one problem with it. There are a host of other plot problems with it. But what those old movies did, I think, fairly well for all their for all their faults, is give us characters who we care about and characters who have genuine motivations. And this is something I realized quite clearly when I was watching House of Wolfman, which is a modern film done as a tribute to these older Universal monster movies, and was attempting to recreate the feel of it. And I'll link to my review of that in the description down below. They did a decent job of recreating the aesthetic. But the film House of Wolfman is populated by characters who don't have any character arcs. They're just sitting around the castle because they've been invited to the castle and they all want to win the prize. But the old Universal monster movies do a very good job of giving characters very compelling arcs. And Lawrence Talbot, aka the Wolfman, the man who's been bitten by the wolf and who is cursed now to become a werewolf with the full moon, is desperately seeking a cure. And the movie revolves around first his quest to convince people around him that he really is dangerous and that something needs to be done, and then his travels and his desperations to find a cure, which bring him into Germany, and he's seeking Dr. Frankenstein because he's hoping Dr. Frankenstein can cure him, not realizing that Dr. Frankenstein is long dead. So the movie has that human interest going on for it. And these, again, for all their faults, I think these old Universal monster movies did that human angle very well. This was reportedly, I say reportedly, meaning based on the information I've been able to find on the internet and on YouTube. This was after Universal had downgraded their monster movies. So originally the Frankenstein and Dracula movies were part of their A pictures, the movies that they would put a lot of money into, and these were their big movies. But House of Frankenstein was the first movie, I believe, where they downgraded them to their B pictures, meaning they were getting produced on the cheap and not as much care was going into them. But it looks good. There are some good shots, some good dramatic camera angles, some good shots of a character suddenly becoming clear in the crowd. Again, you compare this to House of Dracula, which I reviewed 4 years ago. Even though this is a B movie, I think it's a masterpiece compared to House of Dracula. It seems to be very technically well done, even I guess if it's a little bit on the cheap, apparently. And the aesthetics of it, one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of these classic Universal monster movies is because they seem to get the spooky aesthetic of Halloween just right. And this starts right from the first scene, when there are a couple grave robbers who are going into this grave to steal the jewelry that's reportedly been buried with Lawrence Talbot, and unknowingly awaken the Wolfman when they go in there. But they go in and there's this, it's at night, and you have all this mist rising up from the graveyard, and they're going across this kind of spooky hill, and there's a full moon, but it's partially covered by the clouds, and the clouds are moving across the sky. And I just think to myself, when I picture like a spooky night, this is exactly what I pictured, what I would picture. And the thought occurred to me as I was watching this movie, is this some sort of Platonic aesthetic of a spooky night that we all have in our minds and that these monster movies from the 1940s captured so well? Or do we have this image of a spooky night in our minds because they've been created by the monster movies of the 1930s and 40s? Like, do I consider this a perfect aesthetic because I've just been influenced by these movies, and because all of pop culture since then has been influenced by these movies? Like, whenever you're watching any sort of TV show trying to recreate kind of the classic spooky feel, are they all going back to what was established in these early monster movies? Or, yeah, you get what I'm saying, right? Did they create this aesthetic, or are they just doing a very good job of embellishing or embodying this aesthetic? But either way, like I said, when I was a teenager, I used to watch these movies on Halloween, do a little movie marathon, and yeah, they, to me, still seem to perfectly encapture that Halloween feeling. The other thing that this movie has in its favor is it moves at a fast clip. So I think it's very difficult to get bored watching this movie. Maybe a little bit kind of near the end. but it goes at a very, it mostly goes at a very good clip. And it's an interesting plot that if you don't know the plot ahead of time, and, these days, a lot of, it's very easy to know the plot ahead of time by reading a Wikipedia article or watching a summary on YouTube or something like that. But if you don't know the plot ahead of time, it keeps you guessing a little bit as to where it's going. Now, part of that, in the course of that, the protagonist changes a little bit. So we start off with our protagonist as Lawrence Talbot, who's trying to convince a doctor to help him, and then Lawrence Talbot goes off into Europe on his journey. And then at the very end, the protagonist becomes the doctor who is hooked up with Elsa Frankenstein, who's the girl in this flick. And again, talking about how the protagonist changes a little bit. Elsa Frankenstein, when she's first introduced, seems to be forming a detachment to Lawrence Talbot. Again, kind of thinking he's our main protagonist, she's the girl, so they're together. But then she hooks up with the doctor fairly quickly after he re-arrives on the scene. He's been tracking down Lawrence Talbot. So there's an odd kind of change of like, okay, who is our protagonist? But in another way, it makes the movie interesting. It kind of keeps you guessing about what's going to happen. So I think it's one of the more entertaining movies of the monster Universal monster movie franchise, and one that holds up pretty well to modern attention standards. Quite often older movies have a different attention span. This one I think holds up pretty well. And yes, then there's that classic fight at the end between the two monsters, which is very brief. I think when I first watched this movie, I was just waiting and waiting and waiting for the monsters to fight, like I think is true of most people. And then they just fight for like 2 minutes at the very end, but it's an exciting 2 minutes before the castle gets flooded by water. Spoilers, by the way. So, yeah, there is, if you want to get into the trivia about this movie, a ton of interesting things to say. And I'm going to... The camera I'm using automatically shuts off at 30 minutes, so that's generally my time limit for these videos. I'm going to talk about interesting things related to this movie for as long as I can until I run out of time, and then that'll be the end of this review. So, apparently, according to reviews I was watching online, this is the first movie that establishes that the werewolf changes at the full moon. And again, I haven't seen the Wolfman in years and years and years, the original Wolfman. So I'm trusting that this is right. Apparently, in the original Wolfman, it was when the wolfbanes bloom that he turns into a werewolf. Every night when the wolfbanes are blooming. Now it's changed to every time in the full moon. So the idea of him changing into a werewolf on the full moon and that consequently passing on to pop culture was established in this movie. Lawrence Talbot, like I said, is seeking death, and he knows he can't die. Now, in the previous movie, it was established that Silver could kill the Wolfman. That angle has been dropped in this movie. The continuity between these movies is loose, and that's I guess partly based on the fact that people didn't care about it so much back then, and partly based on the fact that there was no home videos. So you could only see these movies in theaters, and if it was a couple years between when the movies came out, then they trusted that you wouldn't remember some of the finer details. Although these films did get re-released in theaters, but I don't know the exact schedule of that. Another thing, according to Wikipedia, I guess part of the way that these movies were being downgraded in quality is Wikipedia said at this point they were aiming these movies at much younger viewers, and so they didn't really. They were thinking that the viewers would be less sophisticated and wouldn't be able to follow some of this logic and continuity. That intrigued me that little bit. I wondered a little bit what exactly they meant by younger viewers. Did they mean like instead of aiming this movie at adults, they were now aiming it at teenagers? Or did they mean that instead of aiming them at teenagers, they're now aiming them at kids, like, 7 years old? I tend to think, let me know what you think. I tend to think that about 7 years old is probably the ideal age to see this movie. Now, again, I didn't see it until I was about 14, or 13, I don't remember. But that's not ideal. The ideal time to see this movie is when you're about 7 years old, I think. And I've mentioned this in previous videos. When I was a kid, I was really wanting to see these movies for some years before my mom would let me. And when I finally saw them, I was disappointed that they weren't really all that scary. I was really looking forward to being terrified by these movies the way kids like to be terrified by scary movies. And, they're not really scary at all. And so it was always For years, I just kind of thought, well, I guess older people, people in the olden days got scared easier because they weren't as desensitized to violence in the media as we are now. And, back in the old days, they were a lot less sophisticated when it came to movies. They just got scared easier, etc. And that was probably part of it. But you also wonder what the target audience for these movies were, because 7-year-olds get scared easily, right? Was it 7-year-olds who were supposed to be watching this movie? Let me know what you think. The other thing which occurred to me as I was watching this movie, because earlier in this week I was watching clips from King Kong on YouTube. I didn't watch the whole movie, but I watched clips from it. King Kong's another movie that I haven't seen for years, and I'm way overdue to revisit one of these days. But I was watching that movie and was reminded of how many people died in that King Kong movie. I mean, there's a heavy body count in that movie. The natives that died, the people in New York who Kong drops off buildings, of course, all the sailors on the expedition, according to Wikipedia, King Kong was a pre-code movie. So that may explain why they were able to get away with all those horrifying deaths in the movie. The Universal monster movies, at least I think most of them, were after the code. Certainly by the 1943, which is when this movie came out, it was after the code. So it raises the question of not only how easily did people scare back then, but how scary were movies allowed to be during the famous restrictive era of the Hays Movie Code, as I believe it was called. But that being said, there are a few scenes in this movie which are, if not scary, at least spooky, and some of them I think are verging a little bit on scary. So that first initial scene with the grave robbers, when they accidentally awaken the werewolf, and the werewolf's hand grabs one of them, and he's stuck in there, and his friend escapes, and he yells, "Don't leave me!" I think they cut it a little bit too soon. It would have been a little bit scary to see him struggling to free himself a little bit, but that was kind of a creepy scene. The scene when the werewolf kills the policeman early on, kind of in the when the policeman is tracking him in that shadowy corner at night, that was a little bit scary. There were other scenes in it that were kind of creepy, and that Festival of the New Wine, when they're singing that song, and it's a very jovial and joyful tune, but the lyrics of that song are ominous. It's a little bit of a strange scene. You either love it or you hate it, as James Rolfe said in Cinemassacre. But it's got this creepy undertone to it.